for whatever reason, I was touched in that moment when I went to that phone, and I knew that I had to quit everything. If I was going to learn to think and understand the world, then I was going to have to do it full time. And that's what I did. And it took a long time. Because I was so far behind, so to speak, I didn't often get arrogant, and think that I knew anything. So the way I am today, when I think I don't know anything, I've been like that from the very beginning.
So you kind of approach it from I'm curious. I'm learning my way through it.
Yeah.
And I think at that moment, it must have been, I think for this stage, your first life lesson was, live without fear.
Yeah, live without fear.
I can't imagine what the thought process you had to go through at that moment.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that gave you kind of the confidence to move on from everything that you were doing?
Well, it was pure curiosity, naivete. If I would have understood what it meant to be an academic and a thinker, and to take what would be considered the intellectual path, I'm sure I would never have done it.
Hey, welcome back to My Perfect Path. For those of you who are new, I'm your host, Daniel Koo, and I welcome you to Season 2. For me, at large pivotal moments of my life, such as applying to new colleges, applying to new jobs, or determining what next career move is right for me, I spent time researching and finding mentorship to determine what was the best path for me. I knew that this struggle was not isolated to me. Everyone struggles with this simply because we cannot predict the future. However, I found something that is second best to predicting the future. It's learning from those ahead of our career and from those who've seen more and experienced more. After all, there are not that many problems that have not been solved yet. If you've ever felt unsure about your next career move, you're in the right place. Today's episode is the season finale titled My Iconoclastic Path. We're interviewing Dr. Sam Richards, a sociology professor at Penn State, whose lectures have been viewed hundreds of millions of times on YouTube. He forces students to confront uncomfortable truths about race, privilege, and power that most of us spend our lives avoiding. You might know him from his lectures or his insights about Korea, but today we're here to talk about his personal career journey and how he came to be. Here's what makes his story fascinating. He never planned any of it. In our conversation, he shares how curiosity became his driving force, why having a marketable backup skill gave him the freedom to take risks, and how his entrepreneurial phase after age 50 taught him that impact matters more than views. We both happened to be in Korea when we recorded this, even though we usually reside in the US, which made for a unique opportunity to sit down together. I think you're going to find this one both inspiring and liberating. Let's get into it, and thanks for listening to Season 2. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to My Perfect Path. I'm Daniel Koo, and today we're diving deep with someone who's made a career out of making people profoundly uncomfortable.
Okay.
And I mean that in the best possible way. Sam Richards is a sociology professor at Penn State, whose lectures have been viewed millions of times on YouTube, not because they're easy to watch, but they're impossible to ignore. He forces students, and by extension, like all of us who are watching, to confront truths about race, privilege, and power that most of us spend our lives avoiding. So I'm really excited to talk to you and, gain insights over your career. If you don't know him, check out Soch119. It's on YouTube, and watch one of his lectures, and you'll kind of figure out what he's all about. So I really recommend that. Here's what makes Sam fascinating. He didn't start challenging the status quo in a classroom. He lived what he calls an iconoclastic path. So we kind of divided today's session into 4 distinct life stages that kind of took him from being a rock musician who skipped school to read in libraries to becoming an academic who's, become a public intellectual by the age of 50. So I welcome you, Sam. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great to be here. So it's really great to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I think just to introduce the big sections that we talked about, first is kind of like your exploring stage, which is kind of your 20s. and you kind of talk about how you're getting your feet wet with a lot of different fields, and you're just trying to figure out life. And then you kind of transitioned into this phase of intense curiosity, as you mentioned, kind of like studying really hard and finding out exactly what you want to study. And then there's the grind, as you called it, the mid-30s to 50s grind of being a professor, of doing research, of publishing papers. So I think there's a lot to learn there as well. And then there's the last kind of stage that we talked about, which is kind of your entrepreneurial stage, which is from age 50 and onwards. I think that's super interesting because most people would imagine retirement or something like that by the age of 50. Maybe they're looking forward to retirement at like 65 plus. But I think for you, there's a really interesting kind of life that started after that. So I want to ask you like how you were able to achieve that and what kind of led you to that.
Yeah, this is really a nice way to organize this conversation. So thanks for that.
So my first question is, if we just go into it, your Soc 119 lectures have millions of YouTube views where you confront students with uncomfortable truths and about race and privilege. When you see a room full of students getting visibly uncomfortable, they're struggling with these ideas, what's kind of going through your mind? Like, are you enjoying the discomfort, or like, I guess, what are you feeling?
Well, first, it's such a big classroom. There's 800 students in there that at most I can kind of look around the room and pick out a few folks, right? And I mostly don't see discomfort. I mostly see curiosity. At least that's what I focus on. And when I see that, when I see people like really listening in and zooming in on what I'm saying, I feel excited. I know things are happening for them. And then when I hear discomfort, when I hear students voicing a certain amount of uncertainty or discomfort or something, I also feel excited about that because, that's what thinking is about, right? It's about stretching the limits of our imagination. And, when you're 20 years old, you don't know much of anything. Well, I'm 64 years old and I don't know much of anything. My knowledge base is very limited. Yesterday, or a couple of days ago, I spoke at the Korean Space Agency, and they were walking me through some of their labs and different things that they were doing, and I thought, my God, and I actually study astronomy a bit and space a bit. Like, I'm really curious about a lot of it. But I was thinking about how much I don't know compared to these folks here. And that's just one tiny slice. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think you're awfully humble for saying that. There's you're obviously an expert in your own domain. But I guess at the same time, there are so many other domains that, we can't possibly know at the same time.
Well, even in my own domain though, right? Like, I study the world. I'm very much a generalist. So my job or my challenge is to know a little bit of something about everywhere, and I do mostly. You can pick out a country or culture on the map, and I most often can say something, right? And quite often I can say a lot because that's what I do. I spend my life studying. But man, the older you get, the less you know. And what that means is the older you get, the more questions you have and the more you realize you don't know and you don't understand. And gosh, everything that's missing, It's like I've traveled to about 50 countries now in my life, and I've traveled to many of them multiple times, and some, 8, 9, and 10 times, and I've lived abroad for many years of my life. But now that I'm my age and I'm starting to knock the countries off my list that I'm really never going to get to, and it's far more than I've ever traveled to, and so I can see all the places that I will not go, and so that's similar to the thinking. I can see all of the things that I will never learn. Yeah.
I like your perspective. It's very, I think the only way to describe it is zoomed out. You're looking at it at a much wider perspective. And that's part of, I think, the unique perspective you have for, these sociological effects, right? These societal issues. I think your perspective on it is so zoomed out that you're able to see kind of like a neutral, balanced perspective. And I really like that.
Yeah, I do too, actually. It's very it keeps me engaged.
One thing that I really like about your lectures actually is the way that you don't have a prescribed lesson, or maybe you do. Maybe you do have something set up, but I really like that you ask questions, like really good questions, and you bounce the students back and forth onto ideas. You're like, maybe you start with one idea, but then you have a question to challenge it. And to flip them onto the other side. And then once they're there, you flip them back, right?
Right. That's a lot of fun. And then they get confused and they have no idea. They think I'm trying to get them to think a certain way. And then I not trick them, but, then I flip them back to where they were sitting, Yeah, I like doing that.
And I think, that does capture, the complexity of a lot of the problems we're facing, the problems you're talking about. And I like that there's no prescribed kind of idea, but, you expose all of these different, angles that a certain issue has.
Yeah. I had that recently. We were talking about climate change and how students in different cultures think about climate change. And with this one particular student, I was kind of walking him through just climate collapse and like, wow, this is such a big issue. And are you thinking about it? And how are you not thinking about this? And this is going to impact your life. And so we started walking down this whole path. And then I turned it around. And I said, well, why would you waste time thinking about this? Like, you're young, you got a life to live. Why are you going to waste time feeling negative? There's nothing you can't do anything about climate collapse.
Yeah, it's not like we can physically go and change something because it's working at such a large scale.
Yeah. But when I flipped it in that way, he was so confused. He said,
wait, why are you doing this to me?
But, going back to the class, you called it a lecture. And it's not really a lecture, people call it that because that's what it's called, in the
structure of the school. Right?
Yeah, in the industry, right? But it's an engagement, right? And I think that if your listeners don't know, usually I pick a topic and then I have student volunteers and I bring some of them down front and then I speak with them. So it's a very different kind of environment.
Yeah, just to, provide context, usually the so-called lectures, the engagement, Sam takes, a long list of volunteers and, you choose a couple of people as a panel to come up front into the classroom and you basically just ask questions and have a discussion and really listen to what people think. And the people watching, I'm sure they're happy that they're in the audience instead of being on the spot. Yeah. But I think just seeing what other people think, verbalizing the ideas that people usually don't, I think that's powerful, and I think that really leads the conversation in a way that it's impactful and it changes the way we think.
Yeah, I think that just on this issue, I don't know if you're going to say, but. Yeah, students, they really do want to talk. Of the 800 students, about 200 of them apply to volunteer. And, they want to they want to be put on the spot. And they don't just want to be on YouTube. They're all always reluctant for that, or at least like reticent about that. But they want to have the challenge to think. And it's never about having an answer because the key, I'm asking them questions about what they see from their perspective. And that I learned from my wife, by the way. As long as you do that with people, they always have something to say. And it's always interesting. And of course, that's why people watch, because they want to know what young people are thinking.
Yeah. And today I want to kind of get into what your life looked like, how you came to be at this point, leading such an amazing kind of class and discussion. And, one of the adjective that we chose today was iconoclastic to describe your path. For you, what does being an iconoclast mean to you? And what's the most sacred belief you have, in yourself that you had to destroy, because of that word?
So an iconoclast is somebody who questions traditional authority or things that are held sacred or of high value by a group of people. I was a working class guy, grew up in Toledo, Ohio, to a family that was not very highly educated. And, when I kind of came of age, I came of age on my own. I've always been kind of a quirky thinker, a bit of a comedian. I asked a high school friend, grade school friend, actually, high school, a number of years ago, what she remembered of me. And she said, hey, you were like a smart, but you were kind of weird smart, And I thought, okay, that kind of makes it work. And I think for me, that the thing I had to break probably more than anything is that as a teacher, that I could have an impact on students' lives in a way that I imagine that I could, right? Like I have a goal. I want to, help shape students I want them to think a certain thing, or not in a bad way, but like good things, and I could make that happen. And I had to really realize that was never going to happen. That was the first thing. It really helped me as a teacher. It made me a much, much better teacher.
Yeah, I guess it's also true that, once you try to force an idea on someone, they're less likely to accept it as well.
Definitely. Or that anything I thought actually mattered to other people. Right. I had to disavow myself of that idea. So I walk in the classroom, I had the idea there's nothing I'm going to say or nothing that will get said in here that has any value to anybody in this room or anybody watching the video. That's how I enter every single class.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just a wide open space for exploration. Yeah. And then because I have the sense that it has no value for anybody, there's no pressure on me because I'm just, we're just spending time together. But
you're just there.
Yeah, you're not going to get anything out of this. I'm not going to get anything out of this. Well, I will get something out of it. I mean, I know it has value for me, but I don't think that any of the students in my class, that it matters to their lives.
That, I think, it can be a very difficult concept to grasp.
Yeah, I'm sure your listeners are going like, what
is he saying? Yeah, but as a professor too, you would expect that there's some sort of content or some sort of agenda. Yeah. But I think with just your domain and, the ideas you want to put out there, or maybe it's not ideas, but ways of thinking that you want to put out there, it's possible, with your style in that domain.
Well, what I want is for students just to think. So if they're pretty certain that I'm not trying to get them to think in a certain way, then they'll be open to thinking. And then they'll stop imagining that there's a right answer. That's the key. That's the struggle here in Korea a lot. The whole education system is built upon right answers, and there are no right answers. And so, I want students to remember that always. So they're not, they don't fall into the trap of thinking. First off, A, that I want them to think a certain way, and B, that there is the best way to think, because there's not.
I'm sure this idea kind of applies to your entire career as well. Mm-hmm. The idea of this podcast is that there is no perfect, path, but it's perfect because it's yours, right? And so if we go back to kind of like stage one, like your first kind of how you grew up, you mentioned you had I think the exact wording was you had an independent mind, and you were kind of quirky and interesting. I guess.
Well, I don't know if I was interesting. I was quirky.
I imagine you were.
I don't know. Quirky. I think I was probably I was very average. I'm still very average, but I was just an average kid. I just happened to be really well balanced for some reason. And
Tell me a little bit about your childhood, I guess. Like, how did you grow up? Like, what kind of, family setting was it? What kind of city did you grow up in?
Well, so my father was 56 when I was born, and my mother was 45. My mother had been married and had 3 kids, and then got divorced from her first husband, and then met my father, but they just kind of lived together for quite a while. She didn't want to get married, and he kind of helped raise my older siblings. And then at some point she got pregnant, and she had my brother who's 2 years older than me. And then she realized, oh wait, I can actually have another kid. She was 43 at that point, right? Mm-hmm. So then they had me. Now I was the only one of her 5 children that she planned. Oh. Okay. So I always think about that. Like, oh, isn't that? So, my parents were older, and then my father died when I was nine and a half.
Oh, wow.
And so, and he had been very science oriented. Now, he didn't even go to high school, didn't graduate high school, but he took college classes. He was sort of outside the box in a way, right? Mm-hmm. My mom didn't go to college, but she graduated 12th grade. None of my grandparents, by the way, I don't think any of them graduated high school. So,
What about your siblings?
My one brother got a math degree. He was a math teacher. Mm-hmm. He retired. But my other three siblings, no, they didn't go. So some of my nieces and nephews went to college, but so it's kind of wild. Like, I didn't know anybody growing up who went to college. None of my friends' parents. I had one friend whose father actually had his PhD in education. I think he might have been the only parent who went to college.
Wow. What gave you the idea to, I guess, go get a higher education after high school?
Well, I wasn't planning on it. I was really pretty poor student. I wasn't a poor student. After my dad died, my neighbor used to take me to the library every few weeks, and I'd come home with a stack of books and I would read through them. I was always reading. My father enjoyed reading. He was, again, science oriented. We had books in the house. We had the great books. We had dictionaries. We had, he made me memorize pi till like the 10th decimal when I was 5 years old, that kind of stuff. He bought me, I had a chemistry set. I had a microscope, I had all that. He was, I was going to be a scientist, right? Mm-hmm. But then he died. And so my mother was working, 2-3 jobs, and I was basically raised myself, and she didn't pay attention to my grades. I mean, if I got C's, it was okay. Just get, how are your grades? Oh, they're good. All right. Okay. There was no pressure at all. So I would read often, but I never brought books home. In high school, I never once brought a book home overnight to study.
Wow.
Well, I actually distinctly remember one time I did, kind of accidentally, but I didn't study. So I never studied for exams or anything, So,
I feel like you're either really smart or you're really irresponsible.
No, I was both. I was irresponsible. Well, I was responsible because I enjoyed thinking on my own terms, right? Actually, strangely, I found school to be pretty boring. So I would skip class. And I would go down to the library. I'd sneak in the library, go in the back so no one could see me, and I'd read books, and that kind of.
When you were reading, you were just reading stuff that you found interesting.
Stuff I would go through, go through the stacks and pick something out. And I'm still that way. I read everything. I'm so, when I was, at the space agency in Daejeon, I was speaking with one of the scientists there about solar flares. So we were watching a video of the sun, it was a live shot of the sun, and the solar flares were happening. Well, I knew something about solar flares, right? Because I read everything. Wow. So I learned more talking to her, and obviously I only know a tiny, tiny infinitesimal fraction compared to what she knew, but I knew something, right? So that's the thing about me. I've always been fascinated by lots of stuff. But in any case, at the very end of my high school career, this might be interesting to your listeners, I suppose, or viewers. At the very end of my high school career, the guidance counselor, I had my one-time meeting with this guy, right? He didn't know me.
And what grade were you in at this?
I was 12th grade, right? So I was getting ready to graduate. And he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. Maybe I think I'm going to try and be a musician because I wanted to make a living doing that." And I said, I'll work. I'll find. I was always working through school. I started a lawn mowing business when I was 11, after
so
my
you
dad
didn't
died.
say that you're going to do public lectures in Korea?
Oh my God. No. Yeah.
How shocking.
Yeah. The fact that he said, well, if you want to, are you thinking about applying to the university? I said, no, I don't, I had taken the SAT exam. I didn't even know what my score was. I didn't even know the score, right? I took it. I'm like, okay. So, he said, well, and by the way, I should add, I didn't know what the exam was when I took it. I signed up. I kind of got signed up for it.
You were just there and you're like.
Just took it on an early Saturday morning. And I think I can say I was hungover, actually. So I also had a fake ID at that time. So I'd go out drinking and stuff, and I was hungover, and I was like, oh, I got to go take this exam. Didn't know what it was, right? So anyway, he said, well, you can apply to the library or to the university here, University of Toledo. And he said, I can give you a pass. You can go out there and apply. I said, oh, and I can get the day off. Now, it didn't matter to me because if I wanted to take a day off school, I would just take a day off school. But I said, okay, well, I'll go out and do that. So the next day I had a motorcycle. And again, I had been working since the age of 11. So I always had money. I put my golf clubs on my back. I got on my motorcycle. I rode out. I applied. It took me about 15 minutes. And then I went to the golf course next door, and I played a round of golf. And then I had my fake ID. So at the end of golf, I went into the bar and drank a beer, even though I was only 17. So anyway, and then I got in, later found out that they admitted everybody to the university. So it wasn't anything special. And I started taking classes. And then I was a house painter. I trained that summer to be a house painter. And so, in the summertime, in 2 weeks, I could make enough money for 1/4 of my tuition. So in 6 weeks, I could pay my whole year's tuition, right?
So when you said you were working since 11, what type of work did you do?
Everything. I would cut lawns. I would, do all sorts of odd jobs for people around the neighborhood. Everybody knew me. I was always doing something. Things like minor, tiny construction thing. As a young kid, I was doing all sorts of stuff, right? Yeah. I worked for my mom. My dad had this factory, this tool and die factory. So, I would go, and she would make these hospital supplies with like these molds and so on and so forth. And she kept the business going. It was a very tiny business, right? Mm-hmm. So I'd go after school and I'd, get the key and I'd open it up. I'd fire up the generator and I'd fire up the machine. And I'm like 13 years old, right? And I'm making these parts with these, and it was so dangerous. My hands, I'm doing all this stuff, pointing, and my hands inside these molds, and like my foot's pressing it's crazy to think back on it. I'd have to climb up on a ladder and pour all the plastic beads into the hopper, then we'd later make all the equipment. It was the most amazing thing for a little kid, right? And then I'd lock it up and I'd go home, you know? So that gave me a lot of kind of self-confidence. It also gave me a sense that it was good to work with your hands and be working class. I felt like a man, a young boy turning into a man. I guess
it's also very productive as well. You feel like you're there to do something. You're there to fix a problem or, to do something. And
I helped to make money for my mom. We didn't have very much money. We were very working class, and it was hard. Those were tough times, So anyway, that's how I ended up.
I think even from then on, I feel like there's a sense of entrepreneurial kind of spirit.
Yeah.
As a kid, I think, I was just playing in the playground,
Yeah.
I was obviously, there's probably a bit of studying, bit of, playing in the playground, learning and things like that. But you're out there doing something. Yeah, and I think that actually sounds very similar to your entrepreneurial spirit. I feel like that's where it comes from.
Yeah, that's right. And then at 14, I started working at a fast food restaurant. Mm-hmm. And then I would work school nights at, till 1, 2 in the morning sometimes. And I had to get up for an early morning class in high school.
I think you mentioned at around 20 years old, you kind of discovered what learning was.
Yeah, that's right.
I think your phrase was, you were finished being ignorant.
Yeah,
I really love that phrase. What was the specific moment that flipped that switch?
Well, first off, at the time I had a girlfriend and her father who had not, I don't think he even graduated high school, but he was one of these guys who was thinking all the time and arguing all the time. And he would argue with her, and then I would just sit back and watch the two of them argue. And I couldn't join in because I didn't, this is from the age of 18 to 20 kind of thing, But finally I just got tired of that, not being able to jump in. And I had transferred to a 2-year college because I kept starting a full load of classes in college and I would stop going. So, I was after 2 years of college, I was not even halfway through my freshman year, right? And my GPA was 1.9 or something. So anyway, I switched to a 2-year college and I was on my way to my class. I stopped going to a couple of my classes. I was on my way to class, and I said, I don't want to go to class. This is stupid. So I went into the library, and I started reading, and I picked out this journal on social work in prisons, and I said, my God, that's really interesting. I think I could work in a prison. And so I went to the phone on the wall, and I called the social work department, and I said, hey, can I come talk to somebody about
Applying for a job there?
no, about studying social work. You know,
yeah,
what could I come back to the main campus and do that? And so he signed me up for classes, and then I went home that day. I called my bandmates. I said, hey, I'm quitting the band, you know, in 2 months. And I went to my job. I was driving a forklift in a lumber yard. And I said, hey, I'm gonna stop, you know, in January, though, I'll be going to school full time. And they said, I thought you were in school full time. I'm like, no, this is different. I'm going to be a student full time. And that was it, man. And then I was in up to my neck.
So it must have been a very big shift from your musician life into kind of, I guess, truly studying. What was your life like as a musician as well? I guess we haven't covered that.
Well, you know, I mean, I started playing gigs. I started gigging, as they say, when 13 was my first gig.
Wow.
Played at our 8th grade dance.
And you said you were a drummer?
I was a drummer. And that was pretty cool. Like when you're in 8th grade, man, and you're playing in a band for your 8th grade classmates, that was pretty awesome. And then I got hooked to playing out. So I was always playing in places because I was always seeking out places where we could play. And we were in and out of bands, you know. It's a cool experience. I mean, you know, to be a musician like that,
To be able to perform.
and to be on stage and
to work as a band. I think as I grow up, it's like, it's really hard to find people to play with.
Yeah. It's hard. Are you a musician?
Yeah, I played percussion throughout, since 2nd grade.
Okay, cool. All right,
So
very
played
cool.
in the school orchestra and things like that. Right now I play at my church band.
And has a trap set, like a drum set?
Like a drum set.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Yeah. It's all, and then, you know, when you're a drummer,
exciting.
you got to take your drums everywhere. So that's a lot, but it's harder as you get older. Right. But for me, those were really good times. I was like, you know, and looking back, I realized I was always that kid doing weird stuff, right? Like I was a drummer in a band, and I was an athlete. I was a jock, right? And I was all sorts of stuff. It was really quite a remarkably fun life. Yeah.
And to, I guess, transition from that fun life into something else, what was going through your mind? Were you thinking that, I had to let these things go in order to invest my time in something different?
Yeah. For whatever reason, I was touched in that moment when I went to that phone, and I knew that I had to quit everything. If I was going to learn to think and understand the world, then I was going to have to do it full time. And that's what I did. And it took a long time. Because I was so far behind, so to speak, I didn't often get arrogant, you know, and think that I knew anything. So the way I am today, when I think I don't know anything, I've been like that from the very beginning.
So you kind of approach it from I'm curious. I'm
curious,
learning my way through it.
Yeah.
And I think at that moment, it must have been, I think for this stage, your first life lesson was, live without fear.
Yeah, live
for
without
this stage.
fear.
I can't imagine what the thought process you had to go through at that moment.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that gave you kind of the confidence to move on from everything that you were doing?
Well, it was pure curiosity, naivete. If I would have understood what it meant to be an academic and a thinker, and to take what would be considered the intellectual path, I'm sure I would never have done it. And at that time, I was a house painter, right? I was painting houses. I started my own house painting business. I was employing people to work for me. I made a lot of money out painting houses. So, no, I never would have done it. No, it was so big. And the more I learned, the more I didn't know. And I would study really hard for my exams, at this point in time. And I'd get like a C. And I'm like, oh man, I study, and I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna ace this exam, right? And I would get a B, and I'd leave the exam thinking, oh, I got an A on that, and I got a B, and I just never could do that. You know, I didn't learn how to study. I didn't know any of that, but I learned how to be curious. I always knew how to be curious, and so that was all that mattered. The A or the B didn't matter to me. What mattered was that I was able to sustain my curiosity.
I like that. I think many people have a problem distinguishing between like smart caution and limiting fear.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think, maybe the solution to that is, as you said, like being curious and, exploring your way through life.
Yeah. Well, also, you understand, all throughout this time, I was painting houses. And really, I could make good money. I mean, I was in the working class, but I could do quite fine in Toledo, Ohio. So I had no fear. If I failed at this, I'd go back to painting houses, and I'll be a house painter for my life. That's fine. I enjoyed painting houses. I like being a working class kid. There aren't a lot of expectations. I mean, you're not thinking like I have to, if my father had been a lawyer or a doctor, and then or my mother, I have to compete at that level. But I wasn't competing with anyone. So, when here's a kind of an interesting story. When I finally finished, when I got my master's, I started working on my master's degree, also at the University of Toledo, because nobody else would accept me for graduate school because my record was pretty poor. But I knew all the professors at the University of Toledo because I painted their houses, which is kind of fun. So, that's good. So one of them called me and said, hey, I hear you want to go to grad school. Why don't you just come here, right? So I did. And then at some point, in my second year, the community college where I had switched to take classes, right? They needed someone to teach a class. So they called over, and the one person said, well, we got this grad student, Sam Richards. He might be interested. He's kind of outside the box. So I went over and I talked to this person, and I said, well, okay, maybe. I was 24 years old. Yeah. And he said, well, what's the class? And I said, well, it's called Cybernetics and Human Ecology.
Oh,
and I went, wow, now that's kind of
What could that possibly be?
What could that be? I never heard of cybernetics before. I had taken a graduate class in human ecology, but I still really didn't understand it. And so I said, well, you mean like kind of technology in human ecology? He said, yeah, okay, that's fine. I said, well, let me think about it. He said, well, you got about 15 minutes because the class is meeting down the hall, right? I said, okay, I'll do it, whatever. How much are you going to pay me? I think they paid me $1,200 or something. Okay. It was really, nothing. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. So I went, got something. I went to the restroom or whatever I did, and I walked down the hall. I had nothing with me. It was just me, right? And I walked down the hall, and I walked into the classroom, and there were 60 or 70 people, at least 60. I think there might have been 70, looking at me. I walked to the front of the room, and I said, hey, does anybody know what cybernetics is? And nobody did. And I said, well, I don't either. I'm the instructor. So I really have no idea. But you know what? We'll figure it out as we go along. Okay. And people are just looking at me. Right?
And that was your first class ever?
First class ever, 24 years old. Knowing with that naive confidence, I was like, you know what? All I know is I'm more curious than anybody sitting in this room.
About cybernetics.
About anything. I'll just attach that to cybernetics, and I'll stay a step ahead of them, and I'll have something to say.
Wow.
And it turns out, it's not like I thought that consciously, but that's what was kind of going on. Like if I just allow my curiosity to guide me, I'll be okay. Well, it turned out to be a pretty good class. Well, it was for me. I learned a lot, so I suppose they learned something, but. Of course, they don't remember any of it,
To kind of dive into your kind of learning stage, what was the most challenging for you when you got into this stage?
Yeah, I think it was that I didn't have study skills. I didn't have organizational skills. I couldn't really organize my mind. I didn't understand how to do that. So I probably spun my wheels more than I maybe needed to at a certain point. But at the same time, it was good because since I didn't have those skills, I hadn't learned them from a young age. There was never I never had the sense that there was a right or wrong way to think, a right or wrong way to do it.
Well, did that cause a lot of friction with the professors and things like that?
No, not per se. I would do what I needed to do in the classes, But you know what? I had a really good mentor. My mentor was a brilliant, very well-known scholar in the Middle East. He didn't publish in English. He was a Lebanese scholar. He published in Arabic, wrote over 50 books. Nobody knew him in the West, but in the Middle East, he was very, very well-known. And so I was his final student. He was such a brilliant scholar. He was at the University of Toledo, and he was there because he wanted to be kind of hidden away. He was
do his own kind of private.
Yeah, and he lived in Detroit. It's close to all the Arab community, and that's where his wife's family was, and so it worked for him. And he would spend many months overseas. But in any case, he was such a brilliant scholar that I knew that I would never be a brilliant scholar. Okay. Because I could never be what he is. I mean, I just knew. And that was a gift for me because I didn't have to compete. I didn't have to try to be really, really special and really, really smart because I saw what it would take to be him. And it was just like, it was never going to happen.
Interesting.
And it took the pressure off of me, in such a really, really lovely way.
So I guess when you saw that person, you felt like that person was on kind of a completely different path.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. He was a scholar. Yeah.
And kind of working at a different scale, kind of at a different frequency almost.
Yeah.
And for you to see that, then it was also a signal for you to not go towards that path.
Yeah.
Was that right?
I tried. I have to say that I tried, but it was just like, it was never going to happen. And this guy. And so it was okay. So I did it my own way, like I just read and think and talk and read and think and talk and, just always trying to swim upstream, never. I learned from him that, he taught me a really important thing. First, this guy is the most brilliant scholar. I could name names, but I won't name names, but who offered for him to be the national scholar of their country. You know what I mean? And he was like, "No, I'm busy. I'm writing my 10-volume book on the history of ideas, right? So I don't have time for that. I got to go hide in my office and work, right? Wow. So, it's just like it's such a gift to know that there's so many different ways to be in the world. So let me just do it my own way. Yeah. And whatever that would be fine.
I think you also described this stage as intensive studying.
Yeah.
And like for that, what did that look like for you, I guess?
Well, I'd wake up in the morning to the New York Times, and I would, back when, you could get it delivered to your door, even when I was in Ohio, I would do that. And I would just read it. I'd spend 2 hours reading. I mean, not the whole thing, because there's no time in a day to read the whole thing, but and then I would put stuff in categories and then it was just a nonstop process of thinking and reading and studying and, not understanding stuff, but then I would just start, slowly over time, I started to put these categories together and the world started to make sense to me. And that just feel really good. When I could be thinking about one place in the world and be drawing on ideas from another place and apply it to here. And especially as a sociologist, it was very, very satisfying in that way.
But when you were starting out and learning, you didn't really know what you were trying to learn?
No, I had no idea.
You were just trying to absorb as much as possible.
Anything I could possibly. And it turns out, strangely, the thing that I ended up focusing on, my thesis for my master's and then my PhD dissertation was this kind of thought system called liberation theology. And it was about the kind of members of the Catholic Church who started to kind of get us in the 1960s that the church was not following the right path. What we need is a preferential option for the poor. The church is interested in maintaining its own position of power and privilege and hierarchy. And what we really need to be doing is doing what Jesus would say to do, which is help the poor. Mm-hmm. And especially in South America, where, there were so many military regimes and so much brutality against inequality and brutality against poor people. We, the church people, should be helping the people who are suffering, right? Well, I came upon that because one day I was walking through the library and there was this book on Brazil and the church. And I don't know why I saw it. I just picked it up. I sat down, I started reading it, and I went, oh my gosh, this is, whoa, you mean Catholics are doing this? Like, whoa, oh, this is pretty cool. So I took it with me, and then I got another one and another one and I wasn't Catholic. Before I knew it, I was so involved in trying to understand who all these folks were. And in the end, I wrote my dissertation and my first book on that.
Wow.
So
I think just being curious is, I don't know if you can learn that or if that's something that's innate in everyone, but I think tapping into that is maybe the key here.
You know, the other day I was at a park with a bunch of Korean parents and their kids. And I watched all these kids. I watched their curiosity. They were all curious. We were doing all sorts of stuff, you know, digging through the dirt, digging through the water, digging the tree. Every single one of them was curious. And I think it's rare that someone doesn't have the spark of curiosity, but it's also rare that the spark doesn't get extinguished in them by school.
That's true. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I think you also mentioned that you try not to follow everyone else's standards.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about the scholar that, your mentor.
Yeah.
But was there something unique that you did during this time that other people didn't do?
Yeah, well, a gift he gave me was he said, hey, don't worry about where you go for your PhD. All you need is a library. You need a scholarship. You need an assistantship or a scholarship because you don't want to have to work. You need to spend all your time studying in the library. And any library you go, anywhere with a PhD program will have far more books than you'll ever be able to read. So that's all you need. Don't worry about the prestige. That was the greatest gift for me, right? And then I think I just followed that. I just never went for prestige. People would tell me, oh, such and such a person. He's like such an important scholar, but we can't be that important. I never heard of him, you know what I mean? How important is he? Like, I don't know. It's me. Like, I'm not, how important am I? Like, nobody knows me. It doesn't matter, So it was like kind of, yeah. So I always had that, That's also the working class thing. You're suspicious of anybody with a title.
Yeah, you're like, I don't really know.
Anybody who thinks they're someone or other people think they're somebody, when you're from the working class, you're just sort of like, you know what, Can you rewire an outlet?
Yeah.
Can you paint a ceiling?
Can you paint a house?
Can you paint a house? Can you change a tire? Can you change your spark plugs on your car? If you can't do any of that, what good are you? Well, that's how I grew up, right? So,
No, I think it's also refreshing. It's very competitive out there. Once you go to college, there's all sorts of, maybe I don't want to say like too much of elitism, but there is a certain hierarchy, of
totally. It's everywhere. Listen, your father's a dentist, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'd be like, okay, well, what happens when his drill breaks? What's he do? Like, well, he calls someone. I'm like, can he fix his broken drill? This guy over here can fix his broken drill. This guy's important, And of course, this guy over here needs your father to take care of him, and then your father needs this guy to fix his drill. They're both equally important. Right. And that's the beauty of being a kid like me, I never forget that. I never forgot it.
Yeah. So I imagine this stage of your life for learning, it really put you out there. It really put you out on the map in terms of knowledge, right? Like you started to learn about the world and you're getting a sense of what to do next.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you found that when you entered the next stage as a professor?
I never had the intention truly of being a professor. I taught because it was part of what I did as a graduate student. I assumed that I'd probably be a professor at some point in my PhD program because I didn't know what else it would be. But, professorial jobs are tough to get. So it was probably 50-50 that I would be a professor or I'd be a house painter or something else. But I didn't think about success. I never thought about, all the way through graduate school, there are a lot of graduate students who, they're building up their vita because they want to make sure that when they enter the job market, they're marketable, they'll get a job, someone will want them. I never did any of that. Didn't think of it. I was building my vita right through I was published a paper with one of my professors. I had a Fulbright grant. I had an NSF grant. I had different things, but I wasn't for the purpose of building my vita and my resume because I had no idea what I was going to do. I was so fascinated, so interested. I was just in that at the wheel, right, of just learning and studying and that kind of stuff.
So the drive for you at this moment, it wasn't to kind of
have a
become
career.
something or like a title or anything like that.
Right,
but
that's right.
It was kind of purely based on curiosity and what you wanted to learn.
Yeah, it was curiosity and what I wanted to learn. Again, I can't emphasize enough to young people, go get a skill that's marketable that you will never not have work, like painting houses, whatever, electrician, plumbing, whatever it is, that the weight off your shoulders, man, it's just, it's the greatest gift ever.
So because you feel like you have a safety net, the decisions that you're making is not based off of some sort of fear of failure or fear of not being able to feed yourself.
Yep.
But it's out of pure curiosity that comes from like the center of your, the core.
That I never lost. I never had to lose it. I never had to do anything I didn't want. Well, there were certain things I didn't really want to do, but,
so for you, what would kind of be an advice for people who are kind of struggling to find that, like their curiosity? Maybe it was extinguished, as you said, after years of school, but if there's any way to revive that or to look for that, what would be your advice? Okay,
well, the first thing is don't start with something that you need to have. Like, well, but I need to make this amount of money or I need whatever it is, right? When you start with that, you already limit what your options are, okay? And that's and I understand, people have student loans. Well, first off, if you're young and you have the option, or if you have children and you want them to line up a whole bunch of student loans, well, all you're doing is you're destroying the opportunities for them to express and pursue their curiosity, because they're going to have to pay the loans back, and they're going to probably have to do things that are not in their best interest just in order to pay the loans back. So that becomes a problem, right? And so I would say maintain the sense that you don't know what your life is going to be. And you don't know what it's supposed to be. And you don't know what's necessarily in your best interests. And if you hold that without starting with this idea that you need a certain number of things, then you're going to be far better off in the short run and in the long run. And you're more likely to be able to have those invisible hands latch onto you. Like when you're on a really cool path. Joseph Campbell said this. He's one of my really mentors, even though I never met him. But when you're doing what you're really best suited to do and supposed to do, it's almost as though these invisible hands, they just reach out and they just pull you along. And they just keep pulling you along. You never really have to try very hard. And when you're not trying to force certain things because of your own beliefs about what you should be and how you should be, then it's more likely those invisible hands can grasp on. And probably what's going on, and this is my advice to everybody, whatever you think you should be or you really want to be, those are just messages you got from other people. Like, oh, I graduated with my high school and everyone expects me to do a certain number of things. Well, who cares what they expect? If you live your life for other people, this is silly. Like my parents or my friends or society, I won't think well of myself. Whatever it is, all these kinds of things, it's just the silliest, stupid thing you could ever imagine. The one gift of my father dying is that from the age of 9.5, I knew death was coming. And it was going to take me away, and I was going to go where my father went, wherever that was. But he didn't take anything with him. The last image that I had of him was laying on the bed, his body after he died. And I looked in the room, and there he was. He was turning, starting already to be discolored, because it's a long story. But I was like, wow, there's nothing that he took with him. I won't take anything with me. So why am I concerned about any of that, and that has stayed with me my whole life. And the closer I get to death, and I'm much closer now because I'm 64, I have these moments where I realize nothing I have is coming. My reputation, nothing, man.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously a lot of pressure from society that we already have, right? About what we need to be.
Yep.
Sometimes it could be parental pressure or peer pressure. But I think ultimately that kind of pressure pushes you in the wrong direction, right?
Totally.
And to your point, it's, we only live one life, and, you kind of have to make that yours.
You gotta make it yours.
And I think, what you said really resonates, because I think when you find something that you really enjoy, it doesn't even feel like work, and I know that's a very cliche saying, but I think it's very true. For me, like engineering, it's super fun. It's intense sometimes being in big tech, but it can be very enjoyable, when we're going through it. And I can see it in the eyes of the people I'm working with, because even though we have tight deadlines and things like that, we actually enjoy it a little bit. And I think that's kind of a really good place to be. I know that's not going to be forever, for my career, but it's a really good place to be. I think you give me the confidence to kind of chase that more. Cool. And it's the same for this podcast as well. And being able to enjoy what you're doing I think is a very good signal. You probably agree with that.
Well, everything I do, like I come here to Korea. I'm here now 3 weeks. My schedule is packed every single day. Even when I'm golfing, you and I golfed a few days ago, right? But even that schedule is packed. I came home from golfing and I was working on a script, and but everything I'm doing, it's like I wouldn't change any of it. It's all, I'm meeting people. It's fun. It's like, it's so much work. This morning, my wife and I, we got up early and we're working on this script for this program we're doing. And I'm like, oh my God. But I'm laughing. I'm looking at her. I'm like, oh my God, isn't this amazing? As we're both totally, pushing it really hard. But everything, it's just, life is exciting. Man, it's so exciting.
I think for you, like this exciting time period didn't come without, putting in the time, right?
Putting in the time, man. You can't imagine how much time I spent, preparing.
Tell us a little bit about how you run your production of your class. Like, what is, the preparation that goes into it? How do you, I guess, plan these conversations when you don't know what the students are going to say?
Yeah, well, I come up with something that I'm curious about. It's like, hey, I wonder what are students really getting offended by things? I was like, is that really it? We talk about, students are so offended. I'm like, are they really? And I wonder how they are in other cultures. Like, what's this like, right? So I'll say like, okay, we're going to talk about, the title is, I'm offended. Like, okay. All right, so what do I want to know? Well, okay, we're going to go to the U.S., so let's talk about being canceled and like how it happens. And like, well, that's a different topic, like canceled.
The cancel culture.
You're canceled. That was another topic I have. But, okay, offended. Like, okay, so then, all right, so let me ask the question. Okay, what does it mean to be offended? And how often do you find yourself feeling like you're offended? And how about your friends and family? Do you talk about, there are these kinds of questions. And then I get my questions. Then I go to my wife, who's the guru of asking questions. And then she like rearranges them and gives me the really good questions. So when you watch my class, I'm always holding a piece of paper. Well, the paper just has questions on them. And their questions are the ones that I wrote, and then my wife rewrote them for me, So anyway, and then I'll pick like, okay, well, what countries would be a good country? Okay. Well, what if I choose somebody from a Muslim country? So we'll talk about like, do you ever get offended when you hear Americans or Donald Trump or somebody, talking about the Muslims, right? Okay, yeah. What about somebody from Mexico? So I get a student from Mexico, student from maybe like, Kuwait or Indonesia or something, and then Americans, and then we bring them up and then we do that. So the thing is I have to think through like the many different aspects of what it is. And then maybe I want to put a couple photos up, or I want a couple graphs about, about being offended or something like that. And so then we operate that way. And then I have to know it's a production, right? It's like a television show. So I got to kind of work here and work there and know when we want. send the mic out to the audience, and
Yeah, I was surprised. You were very active in your lectures as well. Like you move around, you go into the aisle.
Yeah.
I think there was one about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you were visualizing what kind of like the societal gap. If you start out with that, what happens?
Yeah.
And if you start out with that gap, someone's like in the middle of the stairs, someone's at the base of the stairs. And even if you try to catch up, they're just going to move forward, and that visual kind of element, I think, was really powerful. And I'm sure that changed a lot of people's minds about, well, why can't you just work harder, right?
Yeah.
And I think,
right. And like you can work harder, but while you're working really hard, recognize so is that person up there.
Exactly. In fact, they're less tired because they started way up there, right?
Yeah. And again, you hear me laugh at that. Oh, Chris, I laugh. Everything is just laughter, Everybody, oh my God, but it's the inequality of rich people. I'm like, yeah, whatever. You're not going to change that. Just like enjoy, have fun, think about it. Yeah, do your best. I mean, I don't mean it's sheepishly like that. We have racism, we have discrimination. All these things they're really heavy. Sexism, they impact people in really deleterious ways, right? But I've been in the weeds on this stuff. I've been in the trenches for 40 years. If I don't laugh at the world, I can't go on. I can't continue to do what I do. So. And just because I'm a white man doesn't mean that it's like I don't feel things, So yeah, but I laugh a lot.
I think it's also it's a different thing to be able to laugh about it, and also to take it seriously. I think that's kind of separate. Your actions will speak for your philosophies, but then the way you are able to discuss it with other people, that's a separate issue. So I think that's a good take on it. Like, if we are able to talk about it with other people, that's, we are able to change the way we think and things like that. So,
yeah.
All right, let's talk about kind of the last stage that you're in, which is kind of your entrepreneurial stage. And I'm kind of excited about this because, as we mentioned before, it's not like you've planned this out when you were young.
Yeah.
You were thinking about becoming famous in Korea for your love of Korea and,
or famous anywhere, actually.
If they were famous anywhere, right?
I had a first bout with fame when I was kind of had it in the Middle East, actually.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but nonetheless, that's...
But I guess, for this stage, like what is driving you currently? What's the most motivating force for you to do all these things in public in Korea and like doing these lectures, doing these talks? What's kind of like the driving force for you?
Well, first, the fact that I get kind of to a place in my life where I actually have things that are really interesting to say. More interesting to say than when I was younger. That's one of the beauties of growing older as an academic, as someone who, actually any job that you have, right? If I'm a woodworker or an electrician or an artist or anything, you just get better as you get older. You get faster, you're an electrician, you can do things more skillfully. It's cool, right? So it's really fun now to have an opportunity to talk, just like I'm talking to you. It's more fun to listen to myself and hear what I have to say. It's just more fun, I have more to draw on, and so that's what drives me, I suppose. And again, and never wanting to be famous. Although it's funny, I have a story. I don't know if I've ever told anybody this story, so I'm going to tell it to you. Remember the guy that called me on the phone to say, "Hey, I hear you want to go to graduate school. Why don't you come to our program?" That guy, when I got into, and then I applied for PhD programs, and I only got into one. They gave me full funding. It was the lowest ranked program of the ones that I applied to. At some point, I said, "Okay, well," I was talking to him, and I said, "Well, that's where I'm going to go." And he said, "Well, all right, well, this is good." I said, "Hey, but you know what? One day I'm going to be really famous."
Wow.
And he looked at me like I had two heads, right? Like, and I never say anything like that. I never say anything like that. That's just not who I was. It wasn't, but I said it to him. And he said, yeah, what? I said, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to be a famous sociologist. And that was it. I don't know. I don't know where.
There's a bit of premonitions.
Dude, it somehow just got channeled through my crown chakra from the future into here. It never drove me, nothing at all. And then look, this is the irony, right? Okay, I mean, I'm going to say this, because of my videos, we're almost at 500 million views, right? And people know me as a sociologist. Mm-hmm. I might be the most recognizable sociologist in the world, right? Yeah. So famous, whatever it is, but recognizable, right? Mm-hmm. Because so many people watch the videos, right? And how, isn't that odd? Yeah. It's so strange. Yeah.
Something happened back then to set you on this path.
I don't know what it was, but I never tried to be. So my entrepreneurial days were really, once again, kind of me feeling like, okay, I need a little something more. Mm. And then what I saw, the work we're doing at World in Conversation, which is a facilitator training organization that I co-founded with my wife in 2002. Because you have all these, the big lecture class, but what you don't see is all those students are meeting in small groups week after week, right? Nobody sees that. And so she trained the facilitators in a particular methodology and how to hold these conversations to move them forward. And then we started taking these facilitators, giving them more training to do conversations outside of that particular classroom. So at one point in time, we were doing 3,000 dialogues a year at World in Conversation. We were the largest facilitator training and dialogue program based at a university in the world. Mm-hmm. And that happened because because I'm mentally ill, first off, and my entrepreneurial side just kept going, grow. Mm-hmm. And my wife kept saying, dude, you're crazy. We can't do this. It's too much. But I wasn't thinking about the content of them. I was just thinking about giving these opportunities to as many people as possible. And that was that side of me that just said, no, I have to build something. So sometime, maybe in my early 50s, I said, Lori, I think it's because I'm a man. Part of it's because I'm a man. Part of it is maybe my astrological chart. I don't know what it is. I'm an ENTP in the Myers-Briggs. I said, I got to build. I have to build something. I got to have some kind of a legacy, something. People have children, some people have a house, they do this, they do that. I got to build something. And I have to follow this entrepreneurial spirit. So I did. Then we really just took off with this thing. Yeah. And I don't understand, but it was just something in me that said, I gotta make it happen.
So there's something about you that, you have to build this out. Did you have to, make it truly yours?
Yeah, and I was lucky. I had this guy Cole. Mm-hmm. I think I was just told you about Cole. Yeah, mm-hmm. He was a guy who was Cole Camp Lease is his name. He's down at University of Texas now. He was a visionary for technology in the classroom, and he watched a couple of my videos way back before I was making videos on YouTube in the way that I do today. But he watched these two videos and he said, my God, he said, this is amazing. Who's helping you do this? I said, well, nobody. I mean, I just have a couple students that I recruit and we do it. And he's like, okay, what do you need? Whatever you need, let's move this forward. He saw me. He was the first person that came along to really see me. And sometimes we need someone to see us. Now, I didn't need it. I could have just kept going on the way I was going, but he came along and he just said, hey, do more of this. Whatever you need, I'll help you. Just do more of it. Wow. And it was the first time in my life when I actually went, wow, hey, this is pretty cool. Because I wasn't thinking it was cool. I'm just putting videos up. And someone said, this is really, I thought it was cool for me, but only for me. It was just what I thought was cool. I didn't care what anybody else thought, so.
I guess it's interesting. You were already creating at this point. So I imagine you knew you had something, right? You knew you had something, but what, I guess...
But I never... This is a distinction, and I want to say this to other people. I didn't really know I had something. Like I knew that I was doing something that I felt was really creative and I thought was creative. And it didn't matter that anybody was watching these videos. I have the couple videos that Cole watched. One of them at the time had like 100 views. And for me, it was like, oh, look at that. That's such a cool video. It had 100 views, you know? I didn't care. It didn't matter. I thought I'm like, oh, that was so much fun to do that in class and stuff, right? And so other people, sometimes we don't need validation from other people in order to make something really fun and creative. It's like we really just have to see it ourselves. And then maybe like some people write books and the book sits, the writer Hong Kong here in Korea, who's won the Nobel Prize, and suddenly everyone's buying her books. Well, she was a well-known writer, but but people weren't running out to bookstores to buy her books. And many writers are even more so. They write a book and the book doesn't go anywhere. And then 10 years later, somehow it just takes off, right? We don't know when that entrepreneurial passion is actually going to take off.
I think also, it's important that, for Hangang as well, like she kept writing, kept writing. You as well, you were consistently, doing what you were doing until maybe someone came in and said, hey, maybe you should like do more with this, or maybe you should apply this in a bigger scale, right? I guess for you, that was a very pivotal moment in a way. Did you feel like a lot of things changed after that?
Yeah, it changed because there was a whole team of people that were suddenly who I respected and liked, these really fun entrepreneurial folks doing this work on teaching and technology. And they were all like, wow, yeah, this is cool. Like, whoa, hey, Sam, you actually have a lot of ideas. I know I have a lot of ideas. I can't shut my brain up. It's a mental illness, And, but what it did was, it gave me a little extra energy boost, because I'm like, oh, okay. I needed to go to the next level. Like my entrepreneurial spirit stopped right here. And then they said, hey, no. What if you actually look a little further? And I went, okay, let me look a little further. And like, whoa, okay. Then it went here, right? And so like in Korea, it all started with one single video on BTS that I made that I had been talking about Korea. I put up lots of videos on Korea, but there was that one video that just took off that I had no idea. And here I am talking to you. If it wasn't for that video, one day that was an accident, really. I woke up one day and I said, I heard that BTS broke the record for downloads for Taylor Swift. And I said, you know what? I'm going to say something about that in class. And so I did. And then it
really took off.
It took off. And like, I've done so many other things. I'm like, why didn't that take off? Or this should have taken off. But that one did, So that's kind of how life is,
It's interesting to see. It's the practice of creating consistently. And at one point, luck breaks out or something just falls together perfectly. And it really takes off. And I guess the lesson there I don't know if you would agree, but I think for me, the lesson there is, being consistent and like not depending whether you should continue something or not based on external validation yet, right? And just being able to create consistently and kind of seeing how the world reacts to your content, right? Or it could be content or your work. And at some point, they're bound to notice it.
Or they're not. And that's okay, because if you had fun doing it, then that's good enough. And even being consistent or don't be consistent, just do it. And if you get distracted and do something else, then get distracted and do something else. But whatever it is you're doing, enjoy it. But we start, and this is kind of one of the issues with the web, right? And where we're at with social media. It's like we feel like we have to start being really super successful. So here, let me take this podcast, for example, that you're doing. Let's put out two options here. What if it goes viral and suddenly, 3 years from now, you got, I don't know, who knows, millions of downloads,
let's say
right?
maybe.
Okay. Or
10,000 views or whatever.
Yeah.
Just to start.
yeah, just okay. Or you have a really small number of views, but one of your podcasts is going to have a radical inspiration on someone's life, and it's going to change their life, and then they're going to go do something like that. Which one do you choose? Which would you choose? What's really what would you choose?
I think for me, changing one person's life radically is far more valuable than maybe like an unquantifiable, value that gets kind of dissipated throughout the internet,
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing. This is why I never watch my videos. This is why I never read anything. I have no idea. I don't read the views. I don't know. Just because I make videos and some of them have, 100,000 views or 200,000 or 1 million or whatever, and others have 120 or 200. Sometimes the ones with 200 views, I think like, my God, that was a brilliant video. Like, why didn't anybody watch that? That was so cool, thing going. And then the one that gets, 500,000 views, I'm like, oh, that's actually not very interesting. Yeah. So clearly I don't know and I don't understand, but I don't pay attention to it because of that. It's the one thing that I've had people have reached out to me and said, hey, that thing that you did absolutely changed my life. And I think, well, you know what? Okay, I changed one person's life and that's enough. I can go home, pack up my video gear and go home. It really is. So I lived my life with that idea. I don't need anything.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of thinking about it. I think, when you're trying to provide value of some sort, that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast too, right? Yeah. So to provide some sort of value for the people watching, obviously there's going to be the issue of getting it out there and, spreading this interview out to a lot of people so that they can watch it. But, at the end of the day, what I want to do is, provide inspiration, hope, motivation, for those that are looking to develop their careers. So, it's a good way of looking at it. Yeah.
Well, first off, you want to provide inspiration and hope for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, that too.
Okay, that's the most important thing. Me, I'm teaching for myself. Honestly, I go in the classroom, I don't care what my students get out of it. What do I get out of it? That's the thing that I also have learned along the way. Yeah. Stop worrying about my students. Don't care about them. So you want to do that for yourself. And that's most important that you're like, I want to have these conversations because I want to learn and I want to grow. And if other people come along for the ride, that's okay. And if they don't, that's okay too. Because you don't know what's in your own best interest.
Of course.
Right? This might be getting in the way of your own best interest. This place where something you're going to do in the world is going to have such a profound impact on 2 people or 10 people or 2,000 people. You don't know. And this might be getting in the way. So you never attach yourself too tightly to anything. And I think I've learned that over the years. And it works for me. And I think that it's a challenge that's very difficult, but it's a worthy one.
Now, looking backwards a little bit, if you could go back to any of your life stages with your current wisdom, which stage would you go back to? And is there maybe a stage that you would like to change a little bit? Maybe give yourself a little nudge to go on a different path?
Oh, man. I would probably go back to when I was really studying hard and I was a young man trying to kind of find my way a little bit. I probably would. The degree to which I felt uncomfortable about my future in any way, because I wasn't pure, I did trip up and like, oh my God, what if what if I can't,
right.
I would absolutely get rid of all of that. Yeah. I was lucky that it was a very small, tiny voice that wasn't very loud, but I would get rid of all of it. Yeah. I would eradicate the voice fully. But at the same time, it helped me be who I am. So it's all good. Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily like regret or anything like that, but it's I like that. It's what you're trying to say is that we shouldn't fear too much about the uncertainty of what's about to happen.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, because we don't know.
If there's a message to the younger generation who have unconventional ideas but are like kind of terrified of challenging anything, is there anything that you would love to tell them?
Oh, that's so interesting. Since you would think that I do, right? I've been teaching for 42 years. I've been saying things to students, except that at some point I stopped telling them anything. They sometimes ask me, like, what do you need? What do I need to know? Yeah, well, here's the one thing. This is the only thing. This is the life lesson that is the life lesson. And if you don't learn it until you're my age. But you don't really learn it. You're lucky if you do, but if you do, it's probably because you probably smoke a lot of pot or something. I don't know. But okay, look, this is what I tell my students, okay, at this stage, and myself every day. I live with this. Every door that you walk through means there are other doors that you can't walk through. Okay. So, you deny yourself the opportunity of other adventures by being on the adventure that you're on. And what that means is when really good things happen to you and something that you really want to have happen, it happens. Well, that means something else didn't happen. It was going to be even better. Or it means that when that good thing happens, bad things are going to happen as well. Because whatever happens, positive and negative occurs. So, let's say that, you finally get that promotion to the job that you really want. Well, you're going to have to encounter some things that are bad. And you don't know, some of the bad things might be really bad because they might move you to, let's say, Paris, France. And you're working in Paris, France. Oh my God, I've always wanted to work in Paris, France. And you're walking across the road and you get hit by a bus in Paris, France. And you think, I can't. And now
if you hadn't gone, then you wouldn't.
If you hadn't gone there, you wouldn't be that. Like, this is how life is, right? So every negative thing happens. If you get hit by that bus, something positive will happen as well. And that's the positive and negative are in play all the time. And so I'm late to a meeting, like, I shouldn't be late to this meeting. This is such a problem. And the taxi is going slowly and like, oh, come on, dude, it's good. Something positive will happen from that. But I won't sign the contract, right? Because I'm late. Well, later in life, when you get to my age, you'll look back and say, you remember that contract I didn't sign? This other thing happened because that happened. And you'll be able to see all these connections that are positive and negative. And when you see that, it makes life so much more rewarding. And you stress a lot less, So that's my message always to young people. In particular. Of course, you can't understand that when you're young, because you got to get into that graduate program that you really want to get into. And you don't realize that if you didn't get into that, you were going to meet your beloved and you were going to have 2 children and you were going to love those 2 children like you can't even imagine. And and everything that happened, right? Everything good that's ever happened to me was preceded by things that were bad that I didn't want to have happen. So wow.
I mean, I guess that's one way of saying, life is rocky and it's supposed to be that way.
Yep.
And you've told us so many stories about your childhood as well, the things that you had to go through. I just hope, the listeners and, like myself as well, to accept those uncertainties and, when things happen that you didn't plan, it's going to work out in the end in some sort of way.
Well, it definitely will work out in the end. And if you've been on the path, a really good path of growth and curiosity and love, I should say love and understanding and friendship and empathy and all of that, if you've been on that path, it absolutely works itself out in the end. And you look back and you say, okay, it's been a good ride.
Well, Thank you so much for the hopeful message. Thank you so much for your stories. Today, to quickly summarize, I think the number one thing I'm learning is, have curiosity as your drive. And maybe not to be too prescriptive, as we talked about, but having curiosity as your driving motivation helps you a lot because the ideas that are coming out, the motivation is coming from your core, from what you're curious about.
That's right.
And the actions that come out of that make it truly yours. So if you do something with it, it ends up being truly yours. And I think that's something I see throughout your career. And that's something that I'm taking away with me today.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes me happy.
Also, don't fear uncertainty too much. I mean, what you said just at the end there is, things that you feared may be the things that end up helping you, right? Don't fear. The last thing is, I think the last thing is actually, don't feel like you have to do things too early.
Oh man. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
There's, I'm sure plenty of people would have said that you've achieved your success before your 50s, even as a professor.
Yeah.
It's an honorable job. You're teaching. You've already amassed a lot of students and audience, but for something even more to happen after your 50s as well, I think that's incredible. And if we have this kind of limiting mindset of like, oh, I need to do everything in my 20s, 30s.
Oh my gosh, what a horrible, what a terrible thing, you know, what a tragedy, actually. You know, honestly, if I, just given, like when I'm here in Korea and the experiences I have here and who I'm seen to be in Korea and how people respond to me, if that would have happened to me in my 20s, it would have destroyed my life, really. It would, the only way I can deal with it successfully is that I lived for nearly almost 6 decades without having that kind of notoriety. Yeah, so I'm very thankful.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I learned a lot, and I think everyone's going to appreciate everything you had to say.
Yeah, thanks for listening to my stories. And I know I was rather verbose and long-winded, but you know, not everybody, I don't get asked these questions very much. So it's really for me an honor to have this opportunity to talk. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.